but we'll get started. We'll call this meeting to order. The meeting of the City Council workshop meeting will be held online and broadcasted in Washington City's YouTube channel at washingtoncity.org/meetings at 4:30 p.m. For this and future public hearings, we would encourage the public to monitor the agendas on the city's website, as we will only be taking public comments in this manner. No verbal public comments will be taken. If you have questions or comments about any of our processes and procedures, you can contact our city recorder, Denise Bullock. We thank you for your patience, and as we all figure out how to operate in this new world, we're committed to keeping the business of our city up and going and running. We remind everyone that all planning, zoning, and building services are functioning. We're processing those requests as quickly as possible. So now I'll entertain a motion to approve our workshop of an electronic meeting, April 8th, 2020. Looks like there's 5 items.
So made, Councilman Clough.
Seconded by Councilman Coates.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. I'd like to, Terrell Clover, are you on yet? Out of respect to his time, I was going to have him move up to number 2 instead of 3, but.
Mayor, he's on the phone. Sorry, it took me a second to find all the mute buttons required to get him connected, but he's here now.
I'm here.
Terrell, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. You know what, Council, let's go back and approve the agenda. We'll move item 3 to item 2.
Mayor, with that being said, I motion that we move item 3 to item 2 as the agenda is listed so far.
Mayor, I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, I've asked Mayor Clove to come and be on. We appreciate it. Maybe this will bring a little nostalgic back to you, Terrell, but we really appreciate you taking the time. We'd like to have you give us some history about this bronze statue that you had initiated originally, and what your thought processes were, and what you would like our council to consider.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate for a few minutes. This project actually started about 15 years ago when we were getting close to the sesquicentennial celebration of our city. And we talked about doing a monument out in the roundabout, which at that time was there wasn't really much out there, to commemorate the settlement of our city and to honor the pioneers that came here and began this, journey that we all enjoy today down here. And so Jerry Anderson was the artist that we had talked with. He did all the other statues that are here in town. And I've talked with him since, and he's willing to do the project. And so I'll just kind of tell you about what the envision is. It would be a statue, not a statue. It would be actually I think you've got a rendering of it there in your packet. But it would be it'll be about a 15% larger than life, the people and the wagon and everything, but it'll be out there. So when you come into the city, which I think Washington Parkway actually is the grand entrance to Washington. It's kind of in the middle of the city limits there where you come into town. It's kind of virgin territory out there. So now's the time to make a statement with what we're going to do out there. So it would be a project that would take him about 2 years to complete, 1.5 to 2 years. And it would be a total cost. And I just talked to Jerry now. So the price you've got here on this item is $450,000. So it's actually more than that because the foundry costs have gone up a lot. Because when we were going to do the project the first time, it was $300,000 to do the whole thing, and his labor and all that hasn't gone up. It's just the foundry costs have gone up a lot. So it'll probably, he's thinking, when I talked to him originally, it would be about $800,000. But when I talked to him today, he said he's found another foundry and it will be less than that. It might be as low as $600,000 to do the whole project. And so he would need some money up front. to buy the clay. Then he has to pay half of the cost when he sends his artwork to the foundry. And then when it's done, we have to pay the balance. And I think it's a worthy project because, like I said, it's going to be out there where it'll be seen from everywhere because it's an elevated area out there. It'll show up as you come down or up I-15 and even come up the parkway, you'll see it, and it'll be lit. It'll just be a magnificent statement. And I think we were the first city that actually started with any kind of artwork like that when I guess it was the Historical Society that did the Women's Monument at the Relief Society building. And I don't think any other cities had any kind of statuary, but others have followed suit since we put some up. But this would be almost one of a kind. It would be several people and animals, plus the wagon with a lot of the artifacts like that they would be bringing with them, buckets and beds, and that would be in the wagon. I just think it would make a statement that says, we're Washington City. And then especially out there, because that's where the pioneers came in, right there where Grapevine Pass is. And the man out in front, I don't think you can see it on that rendering, but he's actually pointing to Washington, saying, that is going to be our new home down there when they get down here. And I know there's lots of other things that need to be addressed as far as there's never enough money to do what we need to do. But this, like I said, is a monument that symbolizes our city. And we already have a registered trademark that we went through the process to get the Cotton Bowl, which symbolizes the cotton, is why they even came here in the first place. It would represent the arrival of the first settlers in 1857. And then the parkway, like I said, it's a grand entrance, and that would be an elevated area where I think it would just be beautiful out there. And I know there's always going to be controversy. I mean, I know you're thinking about that. There's always going to be controversy no matter what you decide to do on any project. And just a couple of examples of things that happened in our city that we had. Some had horrible, lots and lots of controversy, and some just had, some controversy. But the city hall, the community center, the water wheel sign down at the Nyson Park. Nyson Park itself was very controversial because I remember when the city bought that with money we got from property that Roy Nyson's family gave us in the field. There were people that lived right up there, and I'm not kidding. They called me and said, if we see one more of those old trees go down, we're going to come after you. And I said, well, they have to come down to, put the whole vision together. And so that was controversial. The trails were controversial when they started them. When we put the public safety department in place, very controversial. And even the zoning, when we started the actual zoning ordinances and put them in place, there was tons of controversy about that. But all I can say is even the parkway itself was controversial, actually, because when it was, and F.A. Laczkowski gets a ton of credit for even the reason that's there. Some of the council thought we should just put a 2-lane oiled road up to there and then let the developers put the rest of it in when they developed. But the majority stuck together, said, no, we're going to do what's going to be the vision of the future. And all these things I've mentioned to you already, aren't we glad we did them and not just listen to the naysayers? And, you might get some slack on this one, but I'm just saying down the road, you'll cross your heart and salute as you go by it and say, I'm so glad we did that. It's going to make a difference for the rest of, it'll stay out there as long as I guess the earth stays in place. That's pretty much all I have to say. Only I hope you'll consider it. It isn't a funding thing you're going to have to put all out right now because, like I said, Jerry, it's going to take him 1.5 to 2 years to do it. So that's my spiel. I just hope that you'll consider it.
Thank you very much. Councilman Clough, did you have a question for?
I like the rendering. I appreciate you, Mayor Clove, for being with us. It's always good to hear you. Can you give me an idea of the footprint of this particular statue? What's its dimensions? What kind of area they're at?
I don't know. I know that they're all, like I said, I call it it's about 15% bigger. So the people are going to be like 6'6". The people, I don't know exactly the length of the dimension, but we left a place when we did the roundabout, if you go out there and look, you can see where it's supposed to see it, because they kind of planted out around. It's kind of there at the top of the elevation of the roundabout. So I don't think it would disturb much, if anything, of what is already there. It would just enhance what's already there. And I just think it would be absolutely wonderful to do this.
So help me understand it. So basically, if you left the Washington City where Dixie begins, has a little cotton ball trademark, to basically take off the top of that landscape and put in this statuary in that place, is that what you're saying?
I don't think they take the top off. I think, and Roger might know more because I think they're on the kind of the east side, the west side of that roundabout hill, I call it. There's kind of an area right up there where it would be kind of like they were walking down over the hill to get into Washington. It's not just going to be up there flat. It's going to kind of have some dimension coming down through there. So I don't think they would, because I talked to Jerry about it too. And when we put the roundabout in, we kind of left that there with the idea that this was on hold. And when we got to that point, there'd be kind of a place to put it. So I don't think it would disturb much, and it wouldn't take the top of the hill off. I don't think that wasn't the plan.
And then my final question is, you brought out a timeline, knowing that there's going to be a lot of things, step-by-steps on this. The overall thing, I kind of got this could be anywhere from 2 to 3 to maybe even longer years from this to start to finish. Does that seem about right?
It won't be more than 2 years. He told me it would take him about 1.5 years to do the whole thing. So if, like, for example, if we said right now tonight, we want to do it, we'll give you the money tomorrow to start it, I think he would have it done 1.5 years from now. But he said it might be a couple of years by the time they get their approvals and everything placed. It won't be more than 2. So we would pay for it this year, half of it, I guess, and half of it next year. And it would be completed, I'd say, 1.5 years from now. So maybe Cotton Days, and I'm just using it out of my own mind, Cotton Days of 2022, maybe. I don't know. We'd need to kind of maybe make it around one of the holidays that we celebrate. I don't know if we could have it done by Cotton Days next year, but he might could.
Okay. So anywhere from 2021 to 2022, if we decided to go forward, that could be a possibility.
Yes. Yes, and I think it would definitely be before 2022 when we had to pay for it and when it was in, if we started it right now, because he said it would take 1.5 years to do it.
Thank you.
And when he's doing it, it'd be interesting if you guys, once he starts it, it's really interesting to go up there to his studio in Silver Reef, because you can go right back there. He's got a studio there on the north side of his house. You can go in and just see what he's doing. When he did the other statues, I went in and saw the framework and then the clay work, and it's very interesting and intriguing to see all that going on.
All right. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mayor Clove.
Thank you. Councilman
Thank
Coates.
you.
Yeah, so kind of the questions that I have is, that's a big sticker number, $450,000 to $800,000 on a statue, and I agree that these are great things to have. One of the questions I have is, have we thought about doing, instead of a statue, more of like a cutout? I don't know if you've ever seen down by Desert Canyons, they have kind of those cutouts of mules or something like that, that maybe those are more and can look more affordable and look the same, that we're kind of aspect looking on that area. I don't know if you've looked into anything like that. That's just one thing that came to my mind that I've seen that I like. I'm not saying it's as nice, but it might be more affordable and accomplish the same goal. So those are just some of my
we've
thoughts.
Looked at Jerry. Well, I know, that's why I say I know it's a lot of money. There's no question about it. And Jerry said he's going to, be as fair as he can with this. And that's why when he talked to me today, he said, I found another foundry and it probably won't be more than $600,000 if we do the full wagon. He did come up with another concept, and I don't know if Roger has it there or not, but we'd have to pay for having a fake rock built like they did in Ivans on the roundabout. And then the wagon would be coming out of the rock, and it would just be the front half of the wagon. So all we really would be eliminating would be the back end of the wagon, and it didn't save that much. It was probably 100, maybe 150,000 less, and you'd have to have it. It wouldn't be as visible because you don't be able to see it when you came from the one direction.
That makes sense.
But anything you guys might come up with, but whatever.
And one thing I look at it is as far as the cost goes, those other projects you mentioned are all great projects. I like all of them, and looking at it is that they're a usable project. I mean, I know some of them are a lot more money than others. You can get on it, you can play on it, you can walk on it. And this is more of a visual, which I'm not opposed to. I'm just saying it's a big sticker price.
No, it's a big sticker. That's why I say I understand.
Yeah.
No, I understand totally. If you don't do it, you guys are the ones that make the decision, but you'll do the right thing that is the best for the majority. Like I said, there's always going to be a minority of people that aren't going to want something or never use it. I mean, there's people probably that never use the trails, but we put them in because there's people who do like them. So
yes, and I agree.
It just makes a statement.
I totally agree.
And art's a part of and art I think is very important to a city. And I say all the other cities around here, not all of them, but a lot of them have already taken this to heart and they put in some artwork around it. I think it's made a big difference.
Oh, and I really do like the art that's been put around in areas we've seen. So
yes.
Those are just some of my initial thoughts.
Yeah.
So just wanted to bring those up for everyone to discuss.
No, I understand. They're kind of my thoughts too. So I have the same thoughts.
So, but that's all the questions I have, Mayor. So
Thanks, Councilman. Yeah,
Okay.
Councilman Buck, you had another question?
Yes, Mayor Clove, one question I have is on the other projects that you referenced, how did the community participate in funding those particular statues?
Well, the statues in town, I think they all were funded just through the city.
So
Roger might know, he was here.
and everything was done by.
No, the Relief Society building and the statue down there was all done by the Historical Society and private donations. I don't think the city, as far as I know, I don't think the city contributed much, if anything, to that one. The veteran statue that we did, so the Monument Plaza there at the museum, that was funded through the city. The veteran statue, at that point, the council decided they didn't want to fund any more things like that at that point in time. And so Jerry, I can't remember, he bought back, or he took John D. Lee. We didn't have John D. Lee's statue actually at that point. He took him back, and somehow he traded the veteran statue for the John D. Lee statue. I think that's how he took it back. He gave us the vet, and so that's how we got the veteran statue. But like I said, nowadays everybody thinks how wonderful we've got that there. I think it is a huge addition. So most of the funding I think came through city funds, unless there were some private donations. I don't remember.
Okay, thank you. Those were my concerns. Thank you.
Carol, remind
You're
me
welcome.
again, the upfront for the clay, how much was that? What was that number?
He needed $5,000 upfront for the clay, and then he would need when he went on, after he got the things where he got them molded or created, then send them, he'd have to have half the money
Right.
at that point to send them to the foundry.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any
And
other additional questions or
You're
comments
welcome.
for Mayor Clove?
Do I have any, you say?
Yeah, absolutely. You have any
No,
additional
I don't have any
comments you want to
questions.
end on, Terrell?
No, I don't think of any unless you think I've left something out.
I think you're good.
I don't think I have. I think you've got the idea of what it's all about.
Thank you so much for your time. If there's no additional questions, we'll let you get back to your evening.
I will hang up and I will just talk to you whenever. It's been a pleasure. I think this is the first time I've ever been on this end of an agenda. I've always been on you guys' end of the agenda. So it's kind of a
Good to
different
have you.
feeling.
It was good to have you. Very good.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Mayor.
I'll talk to you anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, item 2, which is item 3, discussion of one-time funding priorities. Kimberly Roche.
Mayor and Council, thank you. And I'm gonna share my screen so I can pull the information up in front while we're kind of going over it. But the purpose of tonight is to be able to talk about the one-time funds that we have. And the reason that we need to talk about them is because we do have a limitation that's placed on us with the state in regards to what we can actually retain on hand to be in compliance with that state law. And so I presented in your packets a spreadsheet that just listed the one-time funding items that we were aware of or had heard in discussions in regards of needs for the city, and what some of the estimated costs were associated with that. In reviewing of that, the items that were recommended were looked at in regards to, from my standpoint, I did look at things that seemed to fall in line with the current strategic plan that the city had. And then in regards to comments, I just noted other options that we might have available for additional funding sources so that you guys would be aware of that as well. So the total amount of estimated, well, the current reserves that we have right now that would have been as of June 30th, 2019 was about $6 million. And that equates to about 27% of our general fund. And so by the end of the fiscal year, when we do our budget opening in June, we need to have identified any locations that we would like to contribute for capital projects that we can include to transfer those funds in the year-end budget opening to get that fund balance below the state maximum. So that's basically the purpose and kind of the objective tonight, to be able to review and look at this information and to have you as a council prioritize these items here if you have anything additional.
Kimberly, I can't see your screen. Are you sharing with us?
Okay. Hold on, let's see. Let's see if it says it is. Sorry
Kimberly, it
about
says it's
that.
sharing on my end. It just doesn't show anything.
Okay.
It looks like you're
Just-
sharing a screen that's blank. Can you shift it from one monitor to the other?
Yeah. Because of the way it's showing, I apologize for that. Let's see if we can.
There we go.
Okay. So are you able to see it now still? Nope, it pauses it. Okay. Sorry.
Well, we had it up there for a minute, and then
Okay.
you. There we go.
Okay. I apologize. Thank you for your patience. This is, I've got two monitors in order to be able to show things, and it appears that it has to be on a specific one in order for that display to work properly. So I do apologize for that. So if you can kind of clearly see now what those items are that we have listed, and then it's just basically to open it up for questions that the council has or a discussion in regards to the priorities that you might like to see.
Kimberly, if we could just point out that we've added one thing, I think only one thing, is that correct, since the packet?
Yes, so since the packet, we did add one item, and let's see if I can identify that.
Should be for
This item here
15,000.
is for the Aeroclave disinfectant tool. And the purpose of this is it's a tool that would allow us to be able to disinfect vehicles and things like that that might be contaminated during situations like we're having now with the coronavirus.
So that one just came to our attention from our public safety people, and we felt it was significant enough to add that one to. Chief Evans has done sufficient research into it to think that, and it's just not only vehicles, we could do equipment or office space or those type of things. So we apologize for adding that one, but we felt like it was worth bringing to you.
My, the pictures of all you have covered my hand waving ability to see who has their hand up. So if any of you have a question, just raise your hand, just so I can. Councilman Coates?
Yes, so kind of wanted to just give some experience on this. So we're recommending this amount. Now, does this fund just get transferred to a different location for future use, or is it got to be spent this year? What is kind of the goal
This
with
would
these
not be
funds?
funds that we would plan on spending this year. It would be funds that as part of the current year budget, you would allocate towards a project that could be spent in next year's budget or future budgets as needed. But we have to identify and assign it basically to a capital project or an equipment purchase before the end of this fiscal year.
So if we assign it to it, it has to go to that specific project, correct?
That is correct. It would take council action to unassign it.
Okay. So one of the things that I've been going through, and let's just start at the top of the pump track park. So it was requested $500,000. And I look at that and I kind of did some research and looked into what it cost St. George City to do their pump track. And they were $1.7 million for the first phase. And they have another $1 million slated over the next few years and that includes parking lot, restrooms, full site. And I know it's a very large park. I'm just concerned that we don't have enough money if we're going to do a pump track park, if we're going down that route, requested in the dollars. And I'm not saying 250 is not a bad start to start putting money toward it, but I'm just concerned we don't have enough money toward that pump track park to manage that. And the other thing I kind of talked to them about was what their maintenance costs are ongoing. And the maintenance costs currently right now, they have one full-time employee and 2 part-time employees that maintain just that park. So it's a big burden besides just the initial cost that we have to look into long-term if we're going to go down that route of a pump track park. And then I had a question about the dog park expansion as well. That's because this doesn't include the money we just spent to buy the property. Correct?
City Manager, did you want to respond to that portion of the?
Yeah, actually, let me point out a couple of things that might help. So Councilman Coach, you are correct. So let me point out real quick what we did. And I shared this with Councilman Ivy as well. So both the pump park, let me just identify these, the pump park, the Covington home, the dog park expansion, the City Hall expansion, all those were, I mean, we've not dove into any of those numbers. So what we basically did is precisely what you said. So let's take the pump park, and this will pertain to all of them, is we just took and said, what could we start with? But we don't know what, we've not dove into it enough. I know Councilman Ivy's working on trying to bring some conceptual stuff back to the council. So you're correct on probably every one of those. They're just going to be kind of placeholders of potential money. And if they're too short, then yes, maybe they need to be delayed because you couldn't get anything with it. But we just wanted to identify those. So some of these are still discussions to be had before the council. For instance, the Covington home 2, we know we probably need to do something so that this doesn't weed over. But again, we don't know what the design is because we haven't come back to the council and got their input yet, but we plan on doing that. So I just wanted to point that out as part of that. And the dog park expansion, yes, is what we just looked at is kind of a placeholder. So these are just placeholders. Let me just say it that way.
Yeah, and they're placeholders, but we're moving funds to those projects right now, correct?
Yes, that's what our intention would be, is that's our recommendation, is that monies begin to go there for that. And so whatever is decided upon as development, and it could be just that we move it there and it just sits there until additional money is moved there.
Yeah. So looking over these, and I know the pump track park might be combined. I'm just concerned that we are putting so much more money and not into a park into the fields. I know the pump track park was talked about being in the fields area potentially. I just want to make sure that we're getting, we've kind of envisioned incorporating a park and a pump track together. And I think that's a great idea. I just want to make sure we're putting money toward there and not putting money toward the dog park expansion right now if we don't need to, because I thought we just spent $300,000 on a dog park land, and maybe not this year. We're not putting another 150. We can move more money to a park that's needed out in the fields, is all my thought is.
Yes, and this is just, all we've done is to just begin the discussion, but you're precisely right. Now that's exactly the level of discussion we'll look for the council to have and then make their recommendations.
So is this the appropriate time? Because that's why I'm bringing it up.
That's the intention that we would like to have, is that the council begins this discussion tonight. Now, again, this won't be probably funded until our final budget opening of the year. And the reason for that is because that fund balance that you see at the top may change a little bit, especially in light of what is currently going on. So what we would do, though, is we would know where this any surplus funds would go in your order of priority for the final budget opening for the end of the year. So it wouldn't be funded right this moment, but we'd know your recommendations and be able to slot those towards those capital issues with the actual funding to occur at the end of the year.
Okay, and then I just have one final question, then I'll yield. When it says RAP tax eligible, are you saying that that you're taking it from RAP tax, or it's just a comment saying that we can go for RAP tax money as well on these?
Those comments are just indicating that these projects are eligible for RAP tax funding.
Okay. And then, sorry, Mayor, I have one more question. Is I don't see any streets on here at all. I'm just curious why we don't have any need for any streets for it. I mean, we have some streets that need some funds to repairs or anything like that. I'm just wondering, for one time, if we have the funds in the fund balance, why don't we have some dire needs on some streets and not rely so much on federal money on all of our streets?
Mike Shaw, are you there?
Mayor, if I may,
Sure.
the reason that we didn't include any street projects on here is because of the number of resources that are currently available for us in regards to the roads in the 5-year plan that we have. We have the new sales tax that was initiated that just started this year that goes towards roads that will be contributed, that we estimate adding $250,000 to $400,000 a year towards roads right now. We have the highway tax money that we also receive, and Class C road funds, as well as impact fee funds. And so in regards to the funding sources that are available and the number of projects we have, from a priority standpoint, that was why we didn't have anything regarding streets that showed up on this particular list. But it is certainly up to the council's discretion if you choose to do otherwise.
And that's the questions I had. I just wanted to bring up those, and I'll yield back.
Thank you. Councilor McCluff, you had a question?
All right, so one of my main questions on this is, Councilman Ward and I have discussed in previous things, I would be fine slotting money away for some of these things, but as a council member, we're doing some things that we'll discuss a lot with process, concepts of parks and everything. We have 2 parks slated on this list, the Pump Park, the dog park expansion. We are discussing the concept of a statue. We are discussing some expansions. I get concerned that a lot of times we set money aside and then have no idea of the renderings and stuff of what are going to happen until after it's just happening. I would like to have some sort of a constraint. I'm fine setting the money aside and having funding set aside for planning and for designs, but not to release the rest of the funds until those designs have been discussed by the council. Those are my main concerns.
So if I can touch on that, yeah, so we wouldn't do that. What we need though is we just need to, right this moment, we have just shy of $1 million that needs to be put in some capital, or at least at the moment. Now, again, it may not be that exact funding amount come the end of the year, but we're anticipating that we'll still have some fund balance that needs to be slotted somewhere, so that we're not out of compliance with the state fund balance requirement. And those can simply, they just kind of simply go into a capital facilities plan, but they're still earmarked. And again, the council has all sorts of discretion to still move those, but we just need to still have those approved by the council to move over to a capital facilities plan with at least an earmark to them. And again, that earmark doesn't mean any more than the council has looked at it. They put an earmark on it, but it can be moved later on. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily spent for that if the council so chooses and goes through the process. But all we're doing is saying we're anticipating potentially $1 million of extra funding that we need to put somewhere. We can't just leave it in the fund. And so I think we can meet all the concerns that you have, but would still probably need to get the council's kind of direction on where you would, what your priorities would be, and then we'll slot those over and kind of give those name tags, if you will.
So let me verify from what you said. One of the main concerns I have is I'm fine setting the money aside, and I get that we do need to follow our state statutes, set this money aside. But within the motion made upon these one-time studies, anything that has a rendering or a design or something that can be drawn and therefore brought back to the council should be brought back as funds are dispersed, because I think that's a vital part of what we do as a council, is to have a voice not only in the initial disbursement of money, but to have a say and an oversight on the actual edification of these funds, especially when you're building parks and stuff. I just would like to see more of this come back before the council rather than just be a postscript email of things that are happening. Just thought you want to know.
No, I agree with you, and all that will happen. All this is right now is just the council giving us direction on set aside of funds. It isn't touching upon the normal process we would do. And as a matter of fact, like I said, I know Councilman Ivey's trying to at least begin some conceptual discussion. We haven't talked to the council yet about what their thoughts are on the Covington home. We don't actually have a lot of thoughts yet on the Covington home, so on and so forth. And so this would not neither deny you of that opportunity, nor would we intend it to be a denial of that opportunity. It's just simply us being able to move some funds appropriately over to the capital budget, but with the rest of the process, of course, being maintained in its fullness.
Thank you. I'm done.
Sorry. Councilman Cox, I think, and then Kimberly, and then Councilman Staley.
I just have a quick question. Roger, are these funds, can we just put them in like areas like parks department or streets department? Do we have to assign an exact project? It's just, I'm not sure.
So I'm going to let Kimberly answer that. It's my understanding, though, that the state audit would like those to be at least identified and more than just generally, but let me have Kimberly speak to that specifically.
Yes, the state requirement for our capital projects requires the funds to be specifically designated towards a project. But at any time, the council could come back together. It just takes council action to move that money to a different project. Now, with what we're doing with these funds here, and when we talk about this excess fund balance in capital projects, this is different than approving necessarily the project as a whole, or again, the total cost of the project. What we're doing is approving funding to either save up towards something that you want to do in the future, or again, if we already know what it is and you want to get started, there's some equipment that we have needs for to buy or purchase. But like, for example, with the cemetery expansion, last year when we allocated excess one-time fund money, we contributed $150,000 to the capital projects leisure services for that cemetery expansion. And so it still needs, the 300,000 is basically the estimate that we're trying to save up to. And then once we have, some funding or we get closer to when we need it, then that would be when all of the finalized design and stuff would be done. But it still requires this item to be budgeted for in the budget before anything can be spent. So this process, there won't actually be a vote or anything that's taken on this. The discussion tonight is to determine what your guys' priorities are and if there are specific dollar amounts that you do want to start slating towards any of these projects. Then in the year-end budget opening, we'll have a much better idea of what the fund balance availability actually is and where we are at in regards to that 25% maximum. And in that budget opening, you're still not authorizing the expenditure. You're simply authorizing the general fund to transfer money to these capital project funds to start saving for them. And then it would be in a future budget, either next year or whenever it's ready, that as part of a budget process or a budget amendment, then those actual costs in terms of the final project would come forward and the council would actually have to include that in the budget opening to spend and start spending any of that money, if that answers any of those questions.
It did, thank you, and I'm done.
Councilman Staley.
I really appreciate the discussion here this evening. This is certainly a good problem to have, excess fund balance. And like any home budget or city budget, there are a lot of very worthy projects that that we could put the money towards. Personal history looking back, I think if you just kind of spend the money and spread it out amongst so many different projects, it kind of dilutes the opportunity. And I think a lot of these things would get picked back up in the typical regular budget anyway. I would love to hear what if the council had strong feelings on 1 or 2 or 3 projects to where, after this, spending excess fund balance, we would have something to show for it afterwards. So I would be curious to hear, what the council's priorities are, maybe, top 2 or 3 projects, and then maybe we can make a bigger impact towards those.
Mayor, may I jump in there?
Yes.
I think that's a great point. In fact, that was going to lead up with my next question, is that maybe what we could do is put together some type of a prioritized list and kind of an idea of how much we would want to put towards each one of those items. I mean, there's things here that we don't really have a lot of information on, like the driving range. I imagine that is an improvement, or to expand it, I don't know, but it's just that type information would be very valuable, so that I personally could make a prioritized list. Of course, I would like to have enough money that we do something substantial, unless that means that we wouldn't have enough for something else that would be needed. But if I may, I'd like to go back and talk just a little bit about the pump park and Councilman Coates. I would love to have a conversation with the entire council about what the ideas are for the pump park. I'm certainly not the person that's in charge of that. I just have been kind of heading it up. I'd love to hear everyone's input to kind of get an idea of what the monies would be, so that we can begin to work on that. But my comment is this: prioritize, and maybe get a little more information before we make a final decision, and kind of make a tally and see where we're at, and then move forward from there. Thank you.
It looks like that we're getting positioned to be able to make those that call, council. So look through that and see and I apologize, in a few minutes after this, if you wanted to talk more about that, what Mayor Clove was talking about, I apologize that I didn't give all of you a chance to visit about that. I just spaced it out, so we could talk about that too. I see it's down there on item 19 down there. So,
Mayor, may I step in?
sure.
Okay, so I appreciate that we're in this situation. I think Councilman Staley, you're right that not all councils have left us with such an insane, wonderful opportunity. This is we're trying to get back down underneath our fund balance maximum. I see this also opens up conversation for us to do more in the future. I'm thinking that even if we do get the pump park all going, I do like the amount of money that's set aside right now in light of what Councilman Coates and Councilman Ivy have said. There's a lot that we're still designing and trying to do. I do anticipate us probably funding more of that based off the information that's been given. And so I think a lot of these things, anything that has a dollar recommendation with the request, I have no concerns. I feel like these things have been brought to us from our staff, from our city, saying that these are their top 22 things that are on their mind. I feel like the setting aside money for the celebrations is appropriate. I do like the idea of the infrastructure, specifically to our buildings and to some of our parks. I am really interested in understanding a little bit more about some of our things that are down the list, but I'm kind of deferring my thoughts on those to when we start to talk about funding those. Things that have a recommended dollar amount next to them. I honestly, the vehicle graphics, the Christmas lighting, I can see our city hall needs some improvements with the HVAC. The only one that I'm just trying to understand a little bit better is the citywide time clock system. Can we get a little bit better explanation of what that is? Because that's a pretty significant dollar mark for some clocks.
Thank you. I think Councilman Staley, were you next? Were you?
No, Mayor, I'm listening. I'm still kind of
Okay.
thinking in terms of top 2 or 3 priority, because I think a lot of these things would handle themselves in the budget over time. But I'm trying to listen and get a good feel for the entire council.
Okay, thank you very much. Kimberly and then City Manager.
On our spreadsheet here that I have doing with you, I did add another column, and I don't know if it updates live for you to be able to see, but there were some items that I wanted to be able to point out and identified as operational needs. So we have projects that are listed here that are project based, and then we actually have operational needs that are for the city. And if we were to prioritize those, again, this is from my specific standpoint, but the disinfectant tool would be a top priority based on the scenario that we're currently in. And then the driving range. The driving range is an item for the golf course that is needed. And it's not something that we can cover with revenues from the golf course. It's something that we would need to identify one-time monies within the general fund to be able to get that project completed. And that we would like to be able to actually do in the next fiscal year. The citywide time clock system, that is actually a payroll item that would put all of the employees on a singular system for tracking employee time. Right now, there's various methods that are utilized to track employee time that have to be all put together to process payroll. And we believe that if we could implement a citywide time clock system, that it would create more efficiencies in terms of operating costs for the city, is fair, as well as making sure that time is applied equally to all employees. The vehicle graphics for the police vehicles and the handgun transition, those are also operational related items in terms of purchases that fall outside of what they're able to fund within their existing budgets.
Thank you. I think City Manager. Then we'll,
I just wanted to point out.
Craig and then Cress.
I just wanted to point out a couple of notes that are on here that you may find helpful. So the single asterisk, of course, is a phased cost. So that, of course, obviously isn't. But I think what's great that Kimberly's put here is the double asterisk means that it relates to the strategic plan. Now, the The specific project may be not listed in the strategic plan, but the expansion of parks out in the field, those things. And so if you see those double asterisks, what she's tried to do is identify things that have been identified in the strategic plan. That's our 5-year strategic plan. And then if those would relate to that in some form or another. I only point that out so that you know what that means.
Councilman Coates?
So can you explain what the project is at the driving range? I mean, I think I heard you talk about that we had a project there, but I didn't get what the project was for the driving range.
So they're looking at expanding that driving range and widening it. And so that they can accommodate more. It'll actually have a revenue component that is associated with it. I think we've seen that, but I don't have it right here. But so what they're doing is looking at expanding the stations. I'm probably not saying that right. The mayor will get on me, but expanding and widening. We have such high demand on our driving range, and we feel like we can fill it, and we feel like the room's there, space is there. Sorry.
Councilman Staley? Unmute. Thank you. Thank you.
I was saying, there's no doubt about it that these operational needs are very important. These are some of the basic functions of the city. I look at where we are in terms of this fiscal year budget. This budget started on July 1, 2019, and it ends on June 30, 2020, which is less than 2 months away. So my question for staff is, shouldn't a lot of more of these operational needs be included into the budget that is currently being prepared and going to be presented to us starting next week? Then the other thing that I would just throw out as a question is, I've heard from various council members the interest in a pump park. So I'm wondering from the council if that is a top priority, and if so, how much of a priority in terms of dollars?
Mayor, may I go? I don't know how you guys are indicating that you're talking.
Down in participants.
Okay.
You can hit participants, and then it says, it's a blue hand you touch.
It says raise hand.
It says raise hand.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Great. I got my hand up now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Of course, my priority is the pump park, and I want to see something substantial done with the money that we have, of course. So to answer your question, Councilman Staley, that's my priority, and I think we need to put enough into it that it solidifies that for us. I feel it's a priority, but I just want to make another comment now that my hand is up. When I look at the City Hall HVAC, recommended is $40,000. I'm assuming that's probably needs to be updated, probably new condensers and equipment. But if I'm just wondering if something like that could be incorporated into, and I don't know the time frame of the City Hall expansion, but you would want to be careful not to do that then if it could wait until we do the expansion, because I'm sure that a lot of that HVAC would need to be redone and new vents and stuff drawn or ran when we do that. So just a thought.
Yeah, so let me answer that. Absolutely. If we anticipated that within a period of time we would expand City Hall, then no, we would not recommend that in the event that we wouldn't want to consider that for some period of time. And I'll tell you why that's such a low number is really all we're looking at is some individual HVAC, individual units for our 3 big areas, our council chambers, our lobby, and our courtroom. And then what that'll do is take the pressure off the rest of the system for all the rest of the offices. So in the event that we don't expand City Hall within, and this is not next year, we don't need to expand City Hall. We just put it down there as just it's a thing coming. But even if that's going to happen within a reasonable period of time, let's say 5 years, I'm not sure that we can't live on the HVAC. But if it was taken off the list, we'd like to address that down the road. To answer Councilman Staley's question, yeah, we'll try to squeeze what we can in the operational budgets. Many of these have been tried to be squeezed in the operational, I don't even know if I said that right, squeezed into the operational budget in times past, but as we've held tight on those, they've just been kind of these unique items that we just decided that, you know, that they may be better suited to at least have a discussion on a one-time funding. But whenever we can, we will try to squeeze those into an operational budget, or when I say operational budget, into an annual budget. Let me say it that way, into an annual budget if we can.
Kimberly, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Mayor. I also just wanted to add a little clarification when we use the term one-time funding and what that means and how it correlates to the budget process in general. So when we prepare a budget, a lot of times when we look at the revenue, there are certain revenue resources that are considered one-time revenues that you don't want to spend on ongoing operational costs because that's not ongoing money that we are going to be receiving. It would be money that, again, that we consider might be one time. So an example of that might be if our average, growth rate for Washington City was holding at 5%, and all of a sudden, as we were looking at this year and we were coming in at 7 and we had a surplus of this money that was coming in because of that growth, that is not money that we want to consider for ongoing operational costs because we don't anticipate to receive that excess revenue ongoing. So when items like that are identified that we receive, interest earnings, are a classic example of one-time monies that we receive, or miscellaneous type revenues. It's things that are coming in at that point and they can't be slated towards operational. And so when I talk to you about this one-time funding, and the reason that you see these operational items that are in there is because they're a priority for the operation of the city that can't be funded with ongoing revenues. This is money that has to be saved up with or come from money that goes outside of the day in and day out work that needs to be done within the city. So the only way to fund these is through these one-time monies. And if they become a priority for you, then in the next budget opening, so either at the year-end budget opening or anytime during the year that there's a budget opening, that's when we actually can spend the money. Or if you show that it's a priority, then you'll see these come forward in the 2021 budget proposal that we're preparing. So we have to get it out in front of you to know as a council what your priorities are as well in regards to one-time funding. And this is just part of that process.
Thank you. I think it was Councilman Coates and Councilman Moore.
Just kind of going off what Councilman Staley asked and just kind of giving my opinion, looking at the list that's presented from us. I look at this and see these smallers, these 10s and 15s and 20s down at the bottom. I see these as things that we can take care of. I don't know if we need more Christmas decorations. I don't know if that's a necessity, but I don't know the status. I'd have to ask Roger on that one. Same with the HVAC, just explain that. I would like to see more money into a park. I'm not saying the pump park. I'm just saying a park in the fields is pretty important. And I look at the driving range as not that critical because it is already there. And then I don't know the expansion of the cemetery. It seems like we are in need of more room. So I think that's an important one. And the Covington home is important too, because we did just get that property next to it. And it would be nice to get something down on that one. As far as the dog park goes, I think we just invested in it by getting the land. I don't think that's a critical one in my mind. So those are kind of my thoughts. I just want to get that out to the council.
Thank you. Councilman Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. So just questioning here, and I'll need some help from staff on policy here, but in the last few weeks, I've been thinking to myself that I was really grateful that the city had a surplus. And I'm pondering what would be the process even to possibly even ask our legislators to ask for a variance to actually hold on to this and postpone this until we actually get a sense of what kind of world we actually live in. The other question I'd put to staff is, do we have a sense of the kind of economic reversal that we're expecting to see from the current worldwide crisis?
So Mayor, if I can answer a couple of those is, we've been working and we've constantly discussed with our legislative body raising the 25%. And by the way, it was 15% not that many years ago. So they raised it. I think the counties are currently at 50%. They've been unwilling to do that at this point. But let me add a little comfort to that though. And also we've got a state auditor that's pretty strict on statutory requirements. So unless the governor would issue something executively, or if the legislature in one of their special sessions between now and then would do something, and we could certainly ask that question. I think our goal would be compliance with the state statute, because I think we'll get tagged pretty hard if we don't. But to add some comfort to that, we've had the finance department look to see what 25% means for us from an operational level, and it puts some good grain and some good cows in the silo to cover us for some time. And so that's the first part. So, and the second part is, yes, we are working diligently because we've got another budget discussion that's going to happen next week in next year's budget. So we're squeezing every department we can right now, from the State Tax Commission to the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget to the Utah Government Finance Officers and the Utah City Manager's Office, to see what anybody is coming up with as it relates to some theory as to what this impact will be. And at the moment, we're not got anything. So, but we are anticipating that what we had anticipated as growth revenues for the upcoming year, that's why we're recarving the budget, because we don't see that happening. So we're going to come with a very conservative budget, but we don't have anything solid yet from all these groups to help us know what that is yet. But we're still going to be showing you next week some pretty conservative numbers for next year. And that's why this number may change too. That's why it could be 966 now, but when we get to the final budget opening at the end of the year, it could be 500 that we're saying is available.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
can I keep going?
Absolutely, yes.
So I'm just wondering, I know that we've asked our state legislators, but if there was ever a reason to expand that grace period, it seems like we've got the reason built in now. I'm wondering if we can maybe ponder about ways to put maybe our League of Cities and Towns and some of our other contacts with our state legislators to work and see if we can get that adjusted. I just have a sense that if they've not been willing to hear that in the past, that right now they might be willing to allow for cities to retain a little bit more money, even if they attach some guidelines to that.
Anything else, Councilman Ward? Kurt, Councilman Ivey, did you have another comment?
Yes, please. Councilman Ward, I have the latest information from the league on this, which is entitled COVID-19 impacts for municipalities. It's anticipated the state will get $1.25 billion, and that will be disseminated throughout the state. And I think they're very aware. They've actually made a list of additional expenses related to COVID-19, and they're trying to work that money fairly throughout the state. And I think a lot of those deficiencies will be addressed by this. Of course, not all. I do agree that we need to proceed carefully and where it's tumultuous times, but the league is on that. And Councilman Ward, I will forward you a copy of that for your own records. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Ward, you still back on another comment?
Sorry, Mayor, my
No,
screen
no
went to
worries.
sleep and I couldn't unmute myself very fast. No, I'm just really nervous right now with such unknown quantities as the economy. We have the potential of a number of we have the potential of a number of our citizens having problems with paying for their utility bills and other things. I just get kind of nervous talking about things that could be put off. And I realize we could put money towards these and then reverse ourselves. I'm just kind of nervous. But frankly, I would like to see that number raised, and I think this is a good opportunity to go raise it. I'd like to get us working with our league officials and others to take another look at this. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Let's go Councilman Staley, and Councilman Clough, and then City Manager.
You know, the other thing, if we're talking about, you know, saving money or having a problem of having excess surplus, maybe we need to talk with, you know, our state legislatures about lowering taxes. If that's the conversation, I know that a municipality exists because the state of Utah says we can exist, and they allow us at the local level to oversee and administer a budget for the benefit of our community. So, you know, I don't know if the legislature is going to allow us to keep 27% or 30% rather than the 25% fund balance. I certainly understand where Councilman Ward is coming from as far as we don't know what sales tax is going to do. Are they going to reduce? Are we going to have, you know, operational shortages because of, you know, sales tax revenue that doesn't come? I kind of tend to think we're going to bounce back from this. I think we're in pretty good financial position. Just to give you a little bit of a point where I am, I really like the police and public safety expenditures. I added those up to about 85,000. To me, those are important. I think it makes sense to keep our HVAC working in City Hall. That 40,000 is important. I appreciated a little bit of here's priorities on the high side, and here are some things that I didn't like from count. I like the way that Councilman Coates prioritized, and I found that I tended to agree with him, and I also appreciated what former Mayor Terrell Clove presented, and I would tend to put the statue toward the top of that list too. So as I see those coming about, I see a pump park to have some general consensus. I see certainly a cemetery as a need. I see the bronze statues being something that will help that area become a economic hub and draw people there. The Covington home, I'm probably more in the middle because that's just talking about putting road base on a vacant lot. I think we can do some other things to keep the weeds away for 150,000. And I agree that the driving range and dog park would be lower on my priority list. So generally speaking, I'm feeling in line with Councilman Coates, other than I like the idea of allocating some dollars to the bronze project.
Thank you, Councilman Clough. Excuse me.
One of my main concerns, I really appreciate all that's been said. This has really made me see this from many points of view. Where I'm leaning more towards having these prioritizations put into place, as Councilman Coates and Councilman Staley have stated. Where I am most concerned, really weighs heavy on my mind at this moment, is input given by Councilman Ward. I really think we've put ourselves in a unique position to be where we are. And I think that we are in a very unique position to really verify some needs that exist. Now, I know that we have some constraints, as City Manager Carter has brought up, but I would feel much more confident if we could do a follow-up conversation with those powers that manage what we can do with this money and how much we can have on hand in light of the COVID. Simply because there are a lot of unforeseens that are not on this list, both how they impact our community, how they impact our city function, that we're just barely getting before us. And so there's a part of me that really sides with Councilman Ward in saying, I'm not opposed to moving forward on this, but I would like to verify if there's a way that we can use this money to address the current issue, which is our number one, is how our city is functioning with COVID-19. All these things right now, I think, don't beat that issue. So I know it's not quite apples to apples, and I'm being very honest in that. I guess with what City Manager Roger Carter has said, we could dedicate this money and say, okay, it's going this way right now. But I feel like there is a very huge possibility that when they come back and say, well, we thought it was going to be $966,000, now it's $40,000, more than likely probably $500,000. I don't think that if we put anything above $500,000 towards anything at this point, that it would really be accurate because of the huge impact that COVID's had on us. I just think there's a lot of heavy things happening that are not being accounted in these numbers. That's my concern.
Thank you, City Manager.
We don't know what we'll anticipate for the remainder of the year because all of our revenue collections are lagging. So more than likely, I mean, we're collecting stuff. I mean, we're just receiving stuff that were collected this last fall, and that'll continue. So the reality is that the impact of the recent pandemic will actually be more of an impact upon our next year than it will be this year. And I only share that just so that you know that we'll probably see, I mean, we'll maybe have to come down, but I don't think we're going to come down leaps and bounds because we're just collecting money that's already been collected and just in the process of passing through. I'm good with, I'm good with a full court press. And years ago, actually, we tried to squirrel away a little bit more than 25%. I think we got away with it a little bit better than I believe we are going to get away with it now. I'm happy. What we would like to see from the council is that you, and it doesn't have to be done tonight, and it probably won't be. So I think what we're looking to see is exactly what you've all done tonight. Great discussion and very well thought out. And so then come back to us. We'll do a full court press with the legislature on an increase and see if that is within the realm of possibility with the legislature or the governor. But I would suggest still that you look at how you would like to allocate these funds. And in the event that we get that increase, that then, you know, we can just say all bets are off. We can just set it aside as a fund balance. But in the event that we don't, I would encourage you to keep working on what your priority list for an allocation is, because I really don't think we're going to come down a ton because, again, we're already dealing with funds that are already collected just on their way to us. Might be a little bit at the end. But also, we really would not recommend, and I don't think we legally can recommend, outside of a change in the law, for the city council to break the law and keep more than 25%. And so if you'll keep working on the allocation, we'll work on the other stuff because I like that idea.
Thank you. Let's see, Councilman Coast and Councilman Morgan.
So just a clarification from what you just said, Roger. So do we want to just put together our wish list and email it to you, or what? I mean, how do you want to see this, or do you want us to address it a different way? I'm just kind of wondering the process you would like us to address this in.
Well, we can do it kind of any way. If you want to do it that way, then what we'll do is kind of, again, cobble it together, get it back to you again, so that you all get to see it and then say, this is what we like. That'll work. We can do some of the legwork on that. It sounds like that there already was some meeting of the minds on some area, and so that's a good discussion. So we can do it that way if you want.
Okay, I think that works for me. I'd like to just rearrange them in my order that I like, and then issue it out to staff to review and look at it and combine with other people's comments.
Council okay with that? Councilman Ward, did you not want
to? My hand was raised from earlier. It didn't come down. I'm good, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councilman Clough?
So as to my understanding, our way of moving forward on this is, as a council, we're just going to take this information, give our opinion, and come back as a council and vote on this later. Is that correct?
That was suggested.
I really appreciate the wisdom in putting that forward, because I feel like this information has been brought for the council to kind of talk about. We got some feedback from our city manager and from Kimberly Roosh. If that is not a burden, would it be possible for us to, as a council, table this? Well, I don't know if this really necessarily needs to be tabled, but if we could give enough time necessary for us to come up with our top 10s, discuss it, and then push it forward, where would that be, City Manager Roger Carter?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You've accomplished exactly what we wanted to have accomplished tonight, and that is get familiar with what we've thrown up, talk amongst yourself, and now if you can just kind of, if we can start to funnel that down, then if we can get your stuff, we'll put it together in some sort of a workable sheet, get it back out to you, and put this on the work session for the next meeting as well.
Thank you. Councilman Ivy?
$8,000 with a priority kind of in an amount and in a prioritized form. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, we'll move on to the last one. I apologize about the bronze statue. Let's think about that, and I'll put it on the workshop again, and then we can discuss next workshop and give you an opportunity to all of you to have the opportunity to have your input. I would appreciate that. We'll move on to item 4, discussion of redundant public hearings. You know, I suspended the last one. So give the staff and the council a chance to figure out where we want to go with it. If we haven't decided one way or the other as a council, if you want to make a change on that, it would take, if I recall from Manager Carter, about a month and a half to make that change. The staff has felt that they've worked out the kinks in that. And if you want to stay comfortable with what we're doing, that's up to council. So questions, comments on that? Totally confuse you? Craig, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, so you're talking about the 2-week holdover, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, or any of the, what we're talking about specifically is more the redundant. So we have, what the mayor suspended is if we heard the particular issue at the planning commission level, and we had 2 or 3 of them that went to the city council, same issue. That was the redundant ones. So you remember we had discussion on both those issues. We had a discussion on both the 2-week holdover and does the city council need to rehear things of the planning commission. The only thing that the mayor had kind of suspended, I guess he did suspend both, but what he did suspend particularly is because we didn't have the burden of public hearings was a problem at the moment. So it was just 1 week that we didn't hear the ones that were already heard in the planning commission. But what I requested, since the mayor suspended that, we always like to get that back to the legislative body as quickly as possible anytime there's a suspension for emergency. And so what all I said to the mayor is, we feel comfortable with the public hearing process now. It's not perfect, but we think we're comfortable enough that we can resume those again, the redundant public hearings, unless the council has come to a decision, and then we would begin revising the code for the redundant hearings. But that takes about a month and a half when you figure we got to go through 2 public hearings in it.
So on the public hearings, I know we don't have to have them. I don't mind hearing them in council as a secondary hearing because we might not hear everything that was said in planning. I mean, we go through the minutes, and so I don't mind how our current process is on the public hearings. A thing I want to get away from is any public hearings that aren't necessary after it's been preliminary platted. Because we don't want to, because after the preliminary plat, they're very, the developer or whoever's developing the land is invested rights. And so I hate to have a false pretense from the public thinking that they can change all this stuff when really it's already, once it's pre-platted, that's when the biggest invested rights is until the final plat, which is the biggest. So that's my only concern there. And then I don't know if I need to go in again on the 2-week holdover I don't think it's necessary, but I also thought we were going to leave it for 6 months and relook at it. But
Yeah,
that's
that
where
was not as much, that one wasn't as much a discussion this evening as just the redundant ones.
okay.
Thank you. Let's go with Councilman Ivy and Councilman Clough.
Again, I don't want to repeat what Councilman Coates said, other than that I thought that we were on a 6-month hold and kind of see how it was going to go. I believe Councilman Ward suggested that, and I felt really good about that, to kind of get our feet on the ground and kind of see how it was going. So I don't mind hearing the public hearings, but I do think that we need to stay the course the way I thought that we had discussed it with the 6-month waiting period. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Clough.
You know, this is interesting to consider it as a redundancy, because though the redundancy is the fact that there is 2 public meetings, I really feel that these public meetings that we're doing as a council, we have all these different committees that we splinter off into as a council, but nothing impacts us more per average on our agenda items as land use. And so I really feel that we need this redundancy at times, well, at this time, because there is so much that needs to be considered and discussed at a council resident level. I understand the needs of the developer, and I think it's some valid points you brought, Councilman Coates. But I think the primary issue that I think needs to be protected by keeping both of these in place is that it allows the council and the community to interact with the intentions of the developer, and at a level which all the council can equally understand the concepts, have time to digest it, and then therefore be able to take that information and make better decisions. Whether that is, hopefully our decisions are based off of a joint understanding that these developers and community members will work together with whatever development goes in. But I just feel strongly that this really isn't redundant. I think that it is imperative for us as a council to have a forum where all of us understand both the public and the developer needs in a very, it's kind of still of a draft phase when it comes to us, to where things can change, move, and be discussed before intentions of development have priority. I think the councilmen need that priority to discuss and understand the concept with the community before we feel good moving forward with the development that's proposed. So my feeling is, I do like going with the 6 months, but to add with the 6 months, my overall feeling is the council needs this redundancy to give us a fair understanding of the community and developer needs when these come up. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Councilman Staley, and then we'll end with City Manager Roger. We need to get ready for our city council meetings.
Mayor, am I understanding correctly that the holdover and the redundancy, these are 2 separate issues? The holdover is saying we have a public hearing and then we wait 2 weeks until we vote on it. Whereas redundancy in public hearings, I guess I'm curious to know what meeting, in particular would you say, are we having a public hearing at the planning commission level that would be redundant at the council level? And are those some that we could eliminate? That would be the question I have for you and for staff, Mayor.
It's a good question. I believe you're correct in that statement. Can I verify that with the manager?
Yeah, so those are 2 separate things. And primarily the purpose here was to indicate, one of the reasons we just suspended what I'm calling the redundant hearings is because we didn't want to, until we figured out the public hearing process, create a compulsion for the public to meet. But I think we got that worked out. So that's the first thing that wanted to be explained. Since the mayor executed his emergency powers, we wanted to explain that. We're good with the 6 months too, by the way, as well. But I believe there are 2 or 3 land use processes, and I don't think any of them are beyond, I don't think anything, we're holding any public hearings beyond preliminary plat unless they're conditional uses or other things. But I do believe we have 2 or 3 that get heard in both categories, and I'll have Drew, I'll get it from Drew and I'll send them out to you on what those are.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Staley, you still have the hand up. Did you want to?
No, I didn't mean to leave it up. I'm still getting used to this.
No worries.
But I like the idea of getting a list of what those specific public hearings are. So I'm happy with that.
We'll get that out to you, out to the council. So thank you very much. I don't want us to feel rushed, but it's about 6. I hope this was good, for our first round. I think it was great. So let's take a 2-minute break and then we'll come back on and stay on, but we'll take a 2-minute break and we'll come back into our council meeting.